This is the second in a series aimed at identifying behavioral annoyances I would rather not have to deal with, but hey, you can't always get what you want. I would rather discuss them here in one central place than have to repeat my reasoning in all my future videos. So without further ado, I present pet peeve number 2. We all have opinions on most every topic, whether we want to or not. It is the natural result of sensing our environment and thinking. It is an autonomic response that appears to help keep us alive. When forced to act, we do so based on our assessment or opinion of our situation. This is normal and natural. By itself, it does not annoy. We live in an information age where we are inundated with a flood of data. If the internet is a fire hose, as individuals we are better suited for a drinking straw. In other words, our cognition is swamped on a daily basis merely by passively being exposed to society. If we actively engage by searching for information, we risk overload. And yet, easy access to much of the world's knowledge at your fingertips is intoxicating. It is empowering. We must, however, be aware of the need for discernment. Not all data is true. Much is false, either deliberately or through ignorance, and the only way I know to hone your filter is through experience, which takes time. Study tempers this knowledge flood and guides our opinion of it. If you cast a wide net in this study, so much the better. In this regard, it is much like nutrition. Those who drastically restrict their diet to a few foods logically run a higher risk of malnutrition if those foods they consume lack essential nutrients the body cannot synthesize. Diversity of thought ought to be welcome in this quest. Sadly, evidence for such is all but missing. Your mind will opine given the slightest amount of data. That is for your benefit. It is not an invite to share. A deliberate act is required to weigh that opinion and resist all temptation to broadcast it prematurely. Consider a truth table that measures opinion strength versus knowledge depth. What can it tell us about the wisdom of sharing opinions? Basically, wait until you can defend your opinion with other than just raw emotion before you unleash it in public. This usually implies time to reflect, to study, to ponder, perhaps to experience firsthand. It has been said there are no shortcuts to any place worth going, an observation decidedly applicable to opinion. The following examples are in need of and could benefit from this advice. High school and college campuses are a hotbed of strongly held and loudly voiced opinions, if the sheer number of YouTube posts in this regard is a valid measure. And yet the whole point of attending these institutions is to learn, which for most logically implies initial profound ignorance, or failing that, in college, intense stupidity for incurring mountains of personal debt in exchange for what is at best positive opinion reinforcement. Gross ignorance or stupidity surrounding one's opinions are hardly attributes that engender another's confidence. While forming opinion, one would do well to heed advice from the past, variously attributed to Abraham Lincoln, Mark Twain, and others. Better to shut your mouth and appear the fool than to open it and remove all doubt. Politicians are often eager to impose this, that, and the other regulation on all manner of business. Minimum wage laws, tax codes, licensing, overtime accounting, Obamacare requirements, etc. ad nauseum. This in turn causes the prices businesses charge for their services or products to rise, to cover the considerable cost of complying with said regulations. I think it fair to question the business experience and sense of those who make and pass these laws. Only a tiny minority of lawmakers actually have personal experience on the receiving end of such regulations. How many of their staff share their ignorance? Business is the engine that moves the world. The number of products and services alone required to enable you to watch this video runs into thousands. That's thousands of individual businesses, each wading through a morass of regulation conceived and implemented by people with little to no knowledge of what it takes to actually launch and keep a business afloat. The eminent economist Dr. Thomas Sowell wrote, "It is hard to imagine a more stupid or more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong." There is no shortage of instances of doctors of conventional medicine expressing strong opinions of subjects they apparently know very little of. As I argue in my book, Hammer, A Critical Look at Healthcare, this failing stems from a near complete lack of understanding of the root cause of most diseases. Here's a thought. If you haven't got a firm handle on the basics of any given fact, perhaps your enthusiasm in articulating your opinion thereof ought to reflect that ignorance. There's no shame in honestly admitting ignorance. Not so in dishonest, misleading bluster. Quite often these medical opinions are voiced in defense of the young, who cannot reasonably be expected to understand health complications. When the legal guardians of such children know even less than their doctors, we have a case of the legally blind leading the truly blind, a sad reality exacerbated by legal persecution of any who would offer insight outside of the conventional medical space. I guess that's one way to suppress competition, but volume does nothing to alleviate the ignorance at its root, much to the detriment of our society. Perhaps it is asking too much to hope that the owners of loud opinions vet them before ejaculating them onto the public. The real problem, though, lies with our lawmakers, who are too often swayed by unfettered hysteria into making rash laws, lest they jeopardize their re-election chances, which then live on long after the emotion that conceived them has faded. This is a bully tactic, which, like all such, has no place in a polite society. Opinions drive the progress of civilization. Their validity sets its direction.